What if I told you that the greatest genius in music history was a filterless rebel who earned fortunes only to starve the next day? You're about to discover how Mozart's mind can transform your mediocre productivity into a real empire of results.
Curious how a man who made crude jokes created humanity's most divine melodies? Stay until the end because I'm giving you the master key to absolute focus that will stop your procrastination and start building your legacy right now.
Look, if you think Mozart was just some God-illuminated snowflake, you've got it all wrong. The guy was a discipline machine disguised as chaos. While Gen Z complains about burnout from answering emails, this dude was composing entire symphonies in his head while playing billiards. He had a growth mindset so aggressive that his creativity overflowed like cheap beer in a dirty glass. The secret to his focus? He didn't wait for the muse to show up. He sat his butt down and worked until his fingers bled, because he had a purpose bigger than his ego. If you want that level of inspiration, stop following Instagram coaches and go read Stendhal's Life of Mozart to see what real resilience looks like.
Tone it down, Daniel, just a notch. Mozart was the king of self-sabotage, an icon with the personality of a 5-year-old who just discovered sugar. But, to be fair, his self-awareness regarding his own art was surgical. He knew he was the best and wasn't afraid to be extremely optimistic, even when his finances were in the gutter. That's pure spirituality, believing in something invisible while the real world demands the rent. Want to apply this today? Watch the movie Amadeus 1984 by Milos Forman. Ignore the historical inaccuracies and focus on the pain of being a misunderstood genius. It's the perfect manual on how your mindset can be your best ally or your worst executioner.
Oh, here you go with the artistic suffering talk. The man was independent by nature, Karen. He literally gave his boss, the Archbishop of Salzburg, a kick in the rear, historically documented, to pursue his transformation as a freelancer. That requires an awakening of courage that most of us, who are scared to cancel a Netflix subscription, can't even fathom. He used the stimulus of financial pressure to produce masterpieces like the Magic Flute. It's proof that provision comes to those who aren't afraid of risk.
Courage or irresponsibility. Mozart spent what he didn't have to maintain an example of a lavish lifestyle that didn't match his income. He was the master of creating an illusion of success while begging friends for loans. But you know what's bizarre? This lack of filter is what granted him limitless creative enabling. He didn't have the inner judge that stops you from starting that new project. In today's finance world, he'd be the guy YOLOing everything into questionable crypto and somehow coming out on top because his talent is the ultimate investment.
Exactly. He was the original skin in the game. And since we're talking about risky bets, Karen, do you think this blind faith in one's own ability is what's missing for people today who only crave security? Because Mozart's next step was dominating people, and that's where things get messy. What do you think of his leadership amidst all that court drama?
Daniel, honey, your obsession with security is so tired Gen Y that it's almost putting me to sleep. Mozart didn't have faith. He had such an absurd technical enabling that risk was just a statistical detail for him. He knew as long as there was a piano and a bored nobleman, he'd have a source of income, even if it was just to blow it all on wigs and parties. People today want his success, but they can't handle 10% of the pressure of being a freelancer in pre-industrial Vienna. If you want to get moving, stop planning and start executing. Or as the master would say, the music is not in the notes, but in the silence between them. Your current silence is just plain procrastination.
Karen, if Mozart lived today, he'd be that canceled guy we love to hate. The man had no filter. His communication was a mix of sheer genius and fifth-grade poop jokes. But look at the persuasion of the guy. He managed to convince Emperor Joseph II to fund subversive operas like The Marriage of Figaro, which basically told the nobles they were idiots. That is pure influential leadership. He didn't command. He charmed and manipulated the environment so that people did what he wanted, thinking it was their own idea. If you want to learn how to convince your boss of a crazy idea, study how Mozart sold his scores before he even finished them. It's high-level negotiation at its finest.
Manipulative or just desperate for attention, Daniel? His proactivity in shoving himself into every social circle in Vienna was almost thirsty. He had zero empathy for his rivals. Look at the half-legendary, half-real beef with Salieri. But his collaboration with librettist Lorenzo da Ponte shows that when interests aligned, he knew how to practice active listening regarding what the audience wanted, delivering one hit after another. He was the networking master before LinkedIn existed. Practical tip? Watch the series Mozart in the Jungle, Amazon Prime. It captures that chaotic energy of managing egos and talents in high-pressure environments.
Thirsty is an understatement. He was an icon of toxic self-confidence. But let's be real, he had to be that way to survive. His interpersonal communication was based on being indispensable. He was the guy who'd show up at a party, sit at the piano, and humiliate everyone, securing his next contract. Today, people are scared of a 30-second pitch, while Mozart did 4-hour pitches in the form of a concert. He used the stimulus of competition to grow. And about Salieri, well, in the free market of genius, if you can't keep up, get out of the way, right? Or are you going to defend mediocrity pity?
Here you go with that powdered wig meritocracy talk again. The problem is that Mozart's lack of diplomacy burned bridges that could have saved his life. He didn't know when to shut up. His persuasion worked on stage, but when it came to asking for a stable, fixed position, he failed because nobody wanted a spoiled genius around. It's the classic career development lesson. Talent takes you to the top, but your behavior keeps you there. If he had a bit more social resilience, maybe he wouldn't have ended up in such a precarious state. Which makes us wonder, was his ethics as flexible as his humor?
Not a common grave, Karen. That's a movie myth. He had a third-class funeral, standard for the middle class at the time. But you hit a point. His transparency was zero. He hid his failing health and debts from everyone. He preferred to maintain the personality of success rather than admit he was broke. This sets the stage for our next topic. What did this guy actually consider as character and justice? Because to me, he just played the game according to the music, and he was the one writing the music. Karen, speaking of ethics and Mozart in the same sentence is almost a bad joke. The guy was a master at distorting transparency for his own benefit. He swore loyalty to Freemasonry while writing letters begging for money and hiding the fact that he spent it all on unnecessary luxuries. His character was guided by a frantic search for justice, but only the justice that put him at the top of the social pyramid. He had responsibility toward his work, but zero commitment to the consequences of his actions in the real world. If you want to see how a lack of integrity can destroy a financial legacy, study his letters to Michael Puchberg. It's a manual on how not to manage your reputation.
You're too rigid, Karen. Mozart's integrity was in his art. He never compromised a single note to please a mediocre boss. That's having character at a level you don't understand. He preferred scarcity over creative mediocrity. While people today sell themselves for any betting sponsorship on Instagram, he maintained his responsibility to posterity. He knew his legacy depended on being true to his vision, not the rules of a hypocritical society. To him, true justice was the recognition of his divine talent, and he fought for it until the end, even if it cost him his stability.
Divine talent doesn't pay the bills, Daniel. His lack of transparency with his own wife, Constanza, about the family's financial situation borders on cruel. He preached Masonic ethics of liberty, equality, and fraternity on stage, but in his private life, he was a broke aristocrat who wouldn't accept reality. It's the classic do as I say, not as I do. If you want to apply this today, learn that being authentic requires responsibility toward those around you. There's no use having a beautiful purpose on LinkedIn if your personal life is a chaos of debt and lies.
Oh, but that's where the controversial debate comes in. Who contributed more to humanity? The upright citizen who paid all their taxes but left nothing behind? Or Mozart, who was a moral disaster but gave us the Requiem? It's the eternal conflict between utilitarian ethics and artistic integrity. I argue that the genius has poetic license. Let the audience in the comments decide. Do you prefer a straight-edge leader with no spark or a controversial genius who delivers extraordinary results but fails in their personal life? Write it down. #TeamRule or #TeamGenius. I want to see the sparks fly in this debate of meritocracy versus morality.
Typical of someone making excuses for a gifted jerk, Daniel. Historical justice eventually elevated his work, but the human cost was high. Mozart wasn't a hero. He was a flawed man trying to balance his creative responsibility with a chaotic personality. To close this loop, his lack of morality almost erased his trace in history, and the only thing that saved him was the overwhelming weight of what he delivered. And speaking of delivery, shall we see how all this chaos turned into productivity in our final topic on results? Karen, let's talk about real productivity. While you take 3 days to edit a video, Mozart wrote over 600 works in 35 years. That's an absurd statistical success. His prosperity wasn't measured in accumulated assets, but in the ability to generate income through the constant multiplying of his ideas. He was a hit factory who understood that growing requires continuous delivery. The guy died broke, but left a legacy worth billions today. If you want that level of recognition, you need to stop chasing perfection and focus on mass execution. It's the law of leveraging. The more you produce, the better your chances of hitting a masterpiece.
He died broke financially, but rich in creative independence. His progressing as an artist is what guaranteed the sustainability of the Mozart name for centuries. The guy was a master of efficiency. He composed while traveling in jolting carriages, without computers, without auto-tune, just by the strength of his winning mindset. That is real victory. He didn't just seek immediate earning, he sought immortality. If you want results today, ask yourself, what am I building that will last longer than a 24-hour story? Mozart invested in what doesn't die.
He invested so much he forgot to pay the baker, right? His financial education was a disaster, and that's a warning for any young entrepreneur today. It's no use having a resounding success if you don't have a backup source. He was a genius of creativity, but an illiterate in investing in his own life. The lesson here is clear. Productivity without management is just a fast track to burnout. He reached the top of the world, but the maintenance of that lifestyle required an emotional enabling he never developed.
But look at the impact, Daniel. The empowering his music brought to Western culture is immeasurable. He didn't just survive, he dominated time. That's what I call high-impact results. He transformed the pain of rejection into auditory prospering. Want a practical example? Go to the Mozarteum in Salzburg, or use the Mozart 225 app to see the magnitude of what a single man can do. He gave us the tools for the awakening of our own capacity for overcoming.
Yeah, he truly woke up the world, even if he slept very little to do it. Mozart's legacy is proof that hard work, mixed with a dash of madness and a lot of discipline, creates icons. He was the ultimate example of how personal transformation through art can change the course of history. Now, the question for those who made it this far is, do you have the courage to be the Mozart of your own life, or will you keep being the Salieri complaining about everyone else's success?
The moral of the story is that an unbridled genius is like a meteor. It burns bright, but crashes hard. How is your life going? Have you been the author of your symphony, or just a spectator applauding others' success while your bank account and self-knowledge rot in the basement? Mozart proved that discipline is the only bridge between a crazy dream and an eternal legacy.
Exactly, and stop making excuses. If the guy composed classics in the middle of chaos, you can turn off TikTok for 15 minutes to focus on your results. Comment below. If you lived in Mozart's time, would you be the misunderstood genius or the envious noble just watching? Also, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and click the link in the first comment to get your Mozart Lego and start building your empire brick by brick.